As the Buddha once said, wisdom is the right understanding of things as they truly are. In Buddhism, wisdom is not simply about accumulating knowledge, it's about perceiving the true nature of reality, seeing things as they truly are, and transcending the illusions that cause suffering. But what does wisdom really mean in the Buddhist context? How is it measured? And how do we cultivate it in our own lives? In today's episode of Universal Understanding, we will explore what wisdom means in Buddhism, how it shapes our journey toward enlightenment, and how we can develop it through mindful practice. Whether you're looking to deepen your spiritual practice or simply gain more clarity in your everyday life, understanding wisdom from a Buddhist perspective offers profound insights. Stay with us as we dive into the essence of wisdom and discover how it can transform not only our understanding of the world, but our very way of being. 1. Defining wisdom in Buddhism. Let me begin with a story from the Buddha's life, one that illustrates the true meaning of wisdom. One day, a young disciple approached the Buddha and asked, "Master, what is the essence of wisdom? What does it truly mean to be wise?" Rather than giving a direct answer, the Buddha led the disciple on a walk to a nearby river. When they arrived, the Buddha asked, "What do you see?" The disciple responded, "I see a river, with water flowing from one side to the other." The Buddha then picked up a handful of dirt and threw it into the river. He asked, "Now, what happens to the dirt?" The disciple observed the dirt being swept away by the current. "The dirt is carried away by the river," he replied. The Buddha smiled and said, "In the same way, wisdom is like the river. It's not about accumulating knowledge like collecting dirt. True wisdom is the ability to see things as they really are, to understand the flow of life, its impermanence, its suffering, and the non-self. Just as the dirt is swept away by the current, wisdom helps us let go of attachments, illusions, and suffering." This story beautifully encapsulates a key point in Buddhism. Wisdom is not about collecting more knowledge. It's about understanding the true nature of reality, letting go of false concepts, and embracing a deeper insight that leads to liberation. In Buddhism, wisdom is referred to as Prajña in Sanskrit or Panna in Pali. It's more than intellectual knowledge. It's the deep insight that comes from experiencing the world with clarity and seeing it without the veil of ignorance. Wisdom, or Prajña, involves understanding three essential qualities of existence. 1. Impermanence, anicca, the realization that everything is in a constant state of change. The body, emotions, thoughts, and even the material world are transient. Wisdom arises when we understand this truth and stop clinging to things as if they were permanent. 2. Suffering, dukkha. Wisdom also reveals the nature of suffering. Suffering exists in many forms: physical, mental, existential. Understanding suffering is not about wallowing in despair, but about recognizing its roots, so that we can transcend it. 3. Non-self, anatta. One of the most profound insights in Buddhism is that there is no permanent, unchanging self. What we call I is actually a collection of ever-changing thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Wisdom arises when we realize that the sense of self is an illusion, freeing us from attachment and ego-driven suffering. This wisdom isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's the kind of insight that transforms the way we live, react, and interact with the world. It's an experiential wisdom that arises from deep meditation, mindfulness, and an open heart. Now that we've understood what wisdom in Buddhism truly means, let's see how it connects to the Four Noble Truths, the foundation of the Buddha's teachings. By understanding these truths, we can see how wisdom directly influences our ability to address suffering and attain liberation. 2. Wisdom and the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths form the foundation of the Buddha's teachings and provide a framework for understanding suffering and its cessation. Wisdom in Buddhism is intricately tied to these truths, as it helps practitioners see and understand the root causes of suffering, and it provides the path to overcoming it. Let's break them down and explore how wisdom is applied to each. The first noble truth, the truth of suffering, dukkha. The Buddha's first teaching was the recognition that suffering is an inherent part of life. Whether it's physical pain, mental anguish, or existential dissatisfaction, suffering exists in many forms. Now, wisdom helps us understand that suffering is universal and unavoidable. It's not just about experiencing pain. It's the recognition that life in its entirety is marked by impermanence, which leads to moments of discomfort and loss. Wisdom reveals that no one is exempt from this, whether we're rich or poor, healthy or sick. Everyone experiences suffering in different ways. When we truly understand suffering, we stop clinging to things in a way that leads to further pain. We begin to accept things as they are, which is the first step toward liberation. The second noble truth, the truth of the cause of suffering, samadaya. The second truth points to the cause of suffering, attachment, tanha, and craving. We cling to things, people, experiences, and even our ideas about who we are, believing that these things will bring us happiness or fulfillment. However, wisdom reveals that these attachments are the source of our suffering. We become attached to things that are fleeting and impermanent, and when they change or are lost, we suffer. Understanding this is a critical moment of awakening. Wisdom helps us to see the futility of clinging to things that cannot give us lasting peace or happiness. It teaches us to let go and stop grasping at transient things. The third noble truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha. The third truth tells us that it is possible to end suffering by letting go of our attachments and cravings. This is the path of liberation. When we stop desiring things to be different from what they are, suffering ceases. Wisdom shows us that by seeing the impermanence of everything, we no longer need to hold on to anything. In this way, wisdom helps us release the chains of craving, leading to freedom from suffering. The fourth noble truth, the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, magga. The Buddha outlined the Noble Eightfold Path as the way to end suffering. This path consists of right understanding, wisdom, right intention, mental clarity, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Here, wisdom plays a central role. Right understanding and right intention are the first two components of the Eightfold Path and are directly related to the wisdom that we cultivate. Right understanding means seeing the world as it truly is, understanding the Four Noble Truths and recognizing the impermanence, suffering, and non-self nature of existence. Right intention involves aligning our thoughts with this understanding, seeking to act with compassion and clarity rather than from desire or ignorance. The cultivation of wisdom is therefore the foundation for the entire path. As we develop a deep, experiential understanding of reality, we naturally begin to live in harmony with the path, cultivating virtues like kindness, compassion, and mindfulness. Having explored how wisdom is intricately woven into the Four Noble Truths, we now shift our focus to how we can bring this wisdom into daily practice. It's one thing to understand the truth intellectually, but how do we deepen our awareness and insight? In the next section, we'll explore how mindfulness and meditation can become powerful tools to nurture and amplify this wisdom in our lives. 3. The role of mindfulness and meditation in cultivating wisdom. In Buddhism, wisdom is not something we simply learn from books or teachings. It is a quality that arises through direct experience, especially through the practices of mindfulness and meditation. These practices are essential for cultivating the deep insight that leads to wisdom. Mindfulness as the key to awareness. Mindfulness, or sati in Pali, is the practice of being fully present and aware of each moment. It's about observing what's happening in the body, mind, and external world with a clear and focused attention. Through mindfulness, we come to see the impermanent nature of our thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Wisdom arises when we observe things without judgment or attachment, allowing us to see the truth of impermanence and non-self. For example, when we feel anger arise, mindfulness helps us notice the emotion before we react. We see the anger not as an eternal part of us, but as a passing mental state. In this moment, wisdom arises through the awareness that this anger is impermanent, and we do not need to cling to it or act on it. Meditation as a tool for insight. Meditation, particularly vipassana or insight meditation, is a central practice for cultivating wisdom in Buddhism. Vipassana involves observing our inner experience, our thoughts, emotions, sensations, without attachment or aversion. By sitting quietly and watching the flow of our inner world, we develop an understanding of the transient nature of all phenomena. As we practice meditation, we begin to notice the constant arising and passing of thoughts and sensations. This practice allows wisdom to emerge naturally. For example, when we sit in meditation, we may feel discomfort or pain in our body. Initially, we may be tempted to avoid or resist the sensation, but through mindful awareness, we begin to see that the pain comes and goes. Just like everything else in life, we start to recognize that all things are temporary, and this realization frees us from the tendency to cling to or resist experiences. Through sustained meditation practice, we also gain a clearer understanding of the non-self, anatta. We begin to observe that there is no permanent I behind our thoughts or feelings. Our identity is constantly changing, and the more we meditate, the more we realize that this so-called self is just a collection of fleeting experiences. The power of insight in daily life. The beauty of mindfulness and meditation is that they don't just stay on the cushion. They transform our everyday life. As we develop wisdom through these practices, we begin to apply this understanding in the world. We see things more clearly, without attachment, without judgment, and without the false belief in a permanent self. For example, during a difficult interaction with someone, we may feel irritation or anger arise. But because we've cultivated mindfulness, we can observe the emotion without reacting impulsively. We can see that it is just a passing feeling, not something we need to act on. This ability to detach from harmful reactions is a direct result of wisdom cultivated through mindfulness and meditation. Now that we've seen how mindfulness and meditation serve as the fertile ground for wisdom to blossom, let's look at the bigger picture. Wisdom isn't just a private, internal experience. It is something that gets reflected in the way we engage with the world. So, how do we know when wisdom has truly taken root? In the next part, we'll discuss how wisdom is measured and what qualities to look for to see its growth and manifestation in our actions. 4. How wisdom is measured in Buddhism. In Buddhism, wisdom is not measured by how much one knows, nor is it something that can be quantified like a score or a grade. Instead, wisdom is reflected in how one lives, how one acts, and how one relates to others and the world. It is the ability to embody the teachings in every moment of life. Wisdom in action, the measure of wisdom. In the Buddhist tradition, wisdom is most clearly seen in one's actions. A person who has developed true wisdom will not only speak about the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, but will embody it in their daily life. Wisdom is expressed through actions that are guided by compassion, ethical conduct, and a deep understanding of the impermanent and interconnected nature of all things. For example, a wise person is not someone who simply speaks eloquently about the Four Noble Truths or the teachings of the Buddha. Rather, they are someone who practices right speech, right action, and right livelihood, all of which are part of the Noble Eightfold Path. These actions reflect a deep inner understanding of the nature of suffering and the cessation of suffering. Wisdom manifests as compassion in action. A wise person does not just understand the concept of non-self, anatta, intellectually. They see that all beings are interconnected and act with kindness and generosity toward others. Their wisdom leads to a life of service and care for all living beings. The role of teachers and spiritual guides. In Buddhism, wisdom is often measured by a teacher or spiritual guide who can discern the depth of a practitioner's understanding. The Buddha himself was known to assess his disciples' wisdom based not on their verbal knowledge, but on their ability to live with integrity, compassion, and clear understanding. A wise teacher can recognize when a student is living according to the principles of the Dharma. They can assess a student's wisdom by observing how they deal with challenges in life, how they cultivate mindfulness, and whether they show progress in their ability to let go of attachment and suffering. Wisdom is not just about memorizing teachings, but about integrating them into daily practice. The wisdom of experience. One important aspect of measuring wisdom in Buddhism is recognizing that wisdom comes through experience, not theory alone. It is through practicing the Dharma, through meditation, mindfulness, ethical conduct, and service that wisdom grows. Over time, a person who practices consistently will develop a deeper understanding of the impermanent and interconnected nature of life. A wise person is someone who, through years of practice, can stay calm in the face of adversity, respond compassionately to the suffering of others, and live in a way that reflects a profound understanding of the true nature of reality. Understanding how wisdom is measured in Buddhism leads us to an important question. How do we begin cultivating it ourselves? Wisdom isn't an abstract idea. It's something we can actively nurture in our own lives. In the final part of this episode, we'll discuss some practical steps and daily practices you can start today to begin your journey toward wisdom. Point 5. Cultivating wisdom in your life. Wisdom is not something that happens overnight. It is a gradual process that deepens with practice and experience. In Buddhism, there are clear paths that we can follow to begin cultivating wisdom in our own lives, no matter where we are on our journey. 1. Start with mindfulness and meditation. As we've already discussed, mindfulness and meditation are central to the development of wisdom. These practices help us observe our thoughts, emotions, and experiences without attachment. By consistently practicing mindfulness, we develop the ability to see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. This clarity is essential for cultivating wisdom. You don't need to meditate for hours each day. Even a few minutes of focused mindfulness each day can help you start to develop the deep awareness that is the foundation of wisdom. Over time, your ability to see the impermanence of all things, the nature of suffering, and the illusion of a permanent self will grow. 2. Study the teachings, but live the teachings. While meditation and mindfulness are critical, wisdom also grows through study and reflection on the Buddha's teachings. However, wisdom doesn't come from knowledge alone. It is not enough to read about the Four Noble Truths or the Noble Eightfold Path. We must also live these teachings. Each time you practice kindness, generosity, patience, or mindfulness, you are integrating wisdom into your life. The Buddha's teachings are a guide for how we should live and relate to others. Wisdom is not just theoretical knowledge but practical knowledge, something that informs our actions. 3. Cultivate compassion and right action. Wisdom is not only an intellectual understanding, but a way of being in the world. Cultivating compassion, acting ethically, and living with integrity are all expressions of wisdom. When we see that all beings are interconnected and impermanent, our hearts naturally open to compassion. We become less attached to our own desires and begin to act with the well-being of others in mind. Start by being mindful of your actions, your speech, your behavior, and your interactions with others. Are they coming from a place of wisdom and compassion? Are you acting with awareness of the impermanent nature of life? Or are you clinging to temporary desires? Wisdom is reflected in how we interact with the world and the people around us. 4. Embrace impermanence and let go of attachments. One of the greatest barriers to wisdom is attachment. We cling to things, people, and even our own sense of self, thinking that they will bring us lasting happiness. Wisdom teaches us to see that nothing lasts forever, and by letting go of attachment, we can stop suffering. This doesn't mean we stop loving or caring for others. It means that we let go of the belief that these things are permanent and that our happiness depends on them. Practice recognizing the impermanent nature of everything in your life, and begin to release your grip on things that you have been holding on to out of fear or desire. 5. Patience and consistency. Lastly, cultivating wisdom requires patience and consistency. It is not something that happens quickly, and it certainly cannot be rushed. The path to wisdom is a lifelong journey, and as the Buddha taught, the path to enlightenment is gradual. Each moment of mindfulness, every act of kindness, and every moment of meditation brings you closer to a deep understanding of the world and the self. The wisdom you cultivate today will continue to grow and deepen over time. So be patient with yourself. Just as a plant needs time to grow and blossom, wisdom needs time to take root in your heart and mind. In closing, we've explored the true nature of wisdom in Buddhism. It is not just intellectual knowledge, but a deep insight into the true nature of reality. Wisdom is cultivated through mindfulness, meditation, and a life lived in harmony with the Buddhist teachings. It is reflected in how we act, how we relate to others, and how we live with compassion and understanding. So, what can you do today to begin cultivating wisdom in your own life? Start by practicing mindfulness. Study the teachings of the Buddha and live with kindness and awareness. Wisdom will gradually grow, not as a result of learning more, but as a result of seeing more clearly and living more compassionately. Thank you for listening to this episode of Universal Understanding. May the wisdom of the Buddha guide you on your path, and may you find peace and clarity in each moment. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe to Universal Understanding for more insights on Buddhist teachings and wisdom. Share this episode with friends or family who might benefit from these teachings. Until next time, may you walk the path of wisdom and compassion.